Law at Work is sponsored by Perrett van Niekerk Woodhouse Macholo, leading labour law specialists representing businesses throughout South and Southern Africa, as well as Case Law, the quick, fast and easy labour law search engine.
Hello, I'm Simon Coleman and welcome to Law at Work. According to the findings of a global survey released last week by PricewaterhouseCoopers, South Africa has the worst economic crime rate in the world. Joining me in the studio to shed light on white-collar crime, I have Flip Stander of Deloitte. Welcome, Flip.
Hi, Simon.
Flip, how prevalent is white-collar crime in South Africa today?
Well, as the survey you mentioned showed last week, it is actually quite prevalent across the world. It's not a uniquely South African problem. It may be somewhat controversial to say we have the highest white-collar crime rate in the world. That really depends on your definition of what constitutes white-collar crime. But it certainly is prevalent in South African businesses. It's not a secret that more than 70% of South African businesses, if we talk specifically about the corporate world, have been affected by white-collar crime at the workplace.
Is that crime that's being perpetuated by their own employees generally?
Simon, it's also no secret in the world of business that more than 60%, I think the latest figures hover around 65%, of employees or of white-collar crimes at the workplace are instituted by employees. Now, obviously you get white-collar crimes at different levels at any workplace. Around about 20% are perpetrated by management or executives. There's a number of recent examples in South Africa and elsewhere of that. Some of the prime examples here would be people like Gary Porrett, Sue Bennett, the late Brett Kebble, all cases being investigated at the moment. While about 85% of people stealing at the workplace are said to be male.
Oh, really?
And yes, male and between the ages of about 30 and 50.
Yes. Can we quantify this? I mean, it's probably a big ask, but is there any way we can attach a number to this problem?
Well, last week's survey mentioned a figure of around 600 million for the past 2 years, which works out to around about 300 million per year.
Yes.
Reliable figures are actually very hard to come by. The Department of Justice recently stated that they estimate anything between 50 billion to 150 billion a year in total for white-collar crime.
That's quite a substantial chunk of our GDP. I mean,
that is a huge chunk. But on the other hand, the South African police estimate that the country loses about 50 million a year on white-collar crime. So as you can see, the figures are wide-ranging.
Yes.
But it would make out a substantial chunk. For us in the, if I may, us in the forensic and dispute services arena, what we can say with certainty is that white-collar crime, the official figures or the state's figures, the figures provided by the police, are certainly not the way we see it. We see it as wholly unreported crime.
Would you say then that it's increasing on year?
Simon, that's difficult to say. It would appear from the various surveys by the professional services firms, which are done year on year, that there is a slight increase. Some of the figures recently have showed that there might be a bit of a decrease, although in monetary value it doesn't look as if there is really a decrease.
I think an interesting point would be, is this an indication that criminals or employees that are going to do this are finding smarter ways of doing it? Or is it an indictment on the procedures, the accounting procedures, say, that are in existence at the companies?
Simon, it's probably a bit of both. It is undoubtedly so that with the dawn of the technological age, white-collar criminals have also become more sophisticated. The problem the state and others normally have is that the corporate world and the state are restricted by budgets. So catching up with crooks in terms of catching up with the technology is not so easy for law enforcement agencies and others involved in that fight. That being said, employers are generally not aware what data they lie on. In other words, what is in their databases. In large companies, they're generally not aware who works for them. With the result that I think in companies of more than 5,000 people,
Yes.
you get a market increase in the instances of or in
Things
the
can
incidents
fall
of.
through the cracks a lot easier, basically.
That's correct.
What are employers doing about this?
Employers are generally in South Africa fairly good, I think, at this stage, and there's an increase in awareness of what should be done. Very effective methods of obtaining information would be something like tip-off lines, which tip-off lines probably make for about half of all reported cases. Also, internal and external auditors are used much more. There's an increasing emphasis on using internal auditors. As you know, from the state side, there's been fairly draconic legislation in terms of reporting duties, although we find that in a lot of companies, the directors and senior management are not aware of those reporting duties, and in fact aren't aware that they can end up in jail for not reporting instances. There's also, the issue of polygraphs. Polygraphs are used more and more, we find, although the admissibility of those tests are limited.
Yes.
But by and large, companies are dealing with it. It's also encouraging to see in last week's survey that more than 50% of companies actually fire their employees and take steps against them.
What's interesting though is once they've gone through with the dismissal, would you say that they're actually recovering the funds that have gone missing, or is that impossible to tell?
See, generally there are three ways of dealing with the matter. The first is to lay a criminal charge. The second one is to institute civil proceedings and try and recover the money. The third one is going the labour route, disciplinary, fire the person and go to the CCMA if necessary. Now, those three aren't interrelated. They're not. It's not necessary that the one happened before the other. Diligent companies with a zero tolerance policy on fraud at the workplace usually follow all three in tandem, and it depends on the circumstances. Tactically, which one would be better to do first?
I think the other thing that seems to be interesting is, are companies not divulging these things? Because it can look bad if something gets into the press that there's been a major fraud in the company.
Yeah, once again, Simon, it depends from company to company.
Right.
You would find that companies with a zero tolerance policy, if there is a huge fraud, would usually act decisively, do the right thing up front, and as a result, their reputation is maintained and is protected.
They've done the right thing, basically.
While in some instances, you do actually find companies that try to put this under the.
Yes.
But I must say, we are also quite good in terms of that. When one look at the world average, South African companies are increasingly doing their thing.
They stack up. Flip, thank you very much for joining me in the studio. You at home, goodbye.
Thank you, sir.
Law at Work is sponsored by Perrett van Niekerk Woodhouse Macholo, leading labour law specialists representing businesses throughout South and Southern Africa, as well as Case Law, the quick, fast and easy labour law search engine.